Let's not beat around the bush. Colby Covington simply doesn't deserve this title shot. In fact, one could argue that when he challenges Leon Edwards at UFC 296 this Saturday, it will be perhaps the most undeserved title shot in the history of the promotion. What up, it's Ant Walker here with the weigh-in, and it's time to talk about Colby Covington. But before we begin, remember to like, subscribe, and share. Tell a friend to tell a friend, tell that friend to tell 10 more friends. You can't deny Covington's place among elite welterweights in the post-GSP era. Even if you despise his antics, it's impossible to ignore the success he's had in the octagon since his debut in the promotion. The problem is, that success is far less recent and dominating than we should expect from someone with an opportunity to be crowned the best 170-pounder in the world. In the over 5 years since he defeated Rafael dos Anjos for interim gold at UFC 225, Colby has fought an average of once a year, compiling a 3-2 record. Those 3 wins were over Robbie Lawler, Tyron Woodley, and Jorge Masvidal. While those 3 names are worthy of respect and have their own admirable legacies attached to them, it's hard to point to them as credible foundations for a title shot to close out 2023. Lawler was a shell of himself when they fought. Woodley was out of the UFC and will become the centerpiece of Jake Paul's highlight reel the next year, and Masvidal will be just one fight away from retirement. When the bell rings at T-Mobile Arena, it will mark the end of a 21-month period of inactivity. During that layoff, Belal Muhammad picked up wins over current top 10 ranked opponents Vicente Luque, Sean Brady, and Gilbert Burns. Before we can put a stamp on this being the most unjustified title challenge ever, let's look at some of the others for this dubious crown. Joe Soto didn't earn his spot against TJ Dillashaw at UFC 177, but it wasn't like the promotion went out of his way to book him. Renan Moral's late injury while cutting weight meant that plans had to change. With a slew of fight cancellations in the 11th hour, there was no wiggle room for the championship main event to be scrapped entirely, and Soto being one half of the only other bantamweight bout originally scheduled meant he got the nod. Vitor Belfort had no business fighting John Jones for the light heavyweight belt, but the fallout from UFC 151 evaporating into thin air pushed him into the spot simply because he answered his phone and said yes. Less than a month later, the cage door was locked. Alexander Gustafsson was knocked out by Rumble Johnson months before challenging Daniel Cormier at UFC 192. But considering Jones was suspended and stripped of the title after his hit-and-run scandal, the division was left in disarray, paving the way for a less than optimal challenger to emerge. Dominic Cruz had been on the show for over 3 years after his lopsided loss to Cody Garbrandt when he fought Henry Cejudo at UFC 249. But with Cruz's status as the bantamweight GOAT and the complicated logistics of staging an event at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, they could have done a lot worse. Perhaps the closest comparisons we can make to Colby Covington getting the unexpected boost are either Chael Sonnen or Nick Diaz. Nick Diaz fighting Georges St-Pierre at UFC 158, while the man who had just beat Diaz for an interim title sat at home was ridiculous. But at least you can bring up the close nature of that loss to Carlos Condit and the years-long speculation about a GSP and Diaz fight as some level of justification. In the case of Chael Sonnen stepping up as a second bloated middleweight in a row to face Jones, he too was there in part due to the UFC scrapping an entire event. But Sonnen's willingness to save the day, combined with the box office appeal he established in his pair of bouts with Anderson Silva, prompted the company to not only opt for a full camp version of the unlikely pairing, but generate hype by pitting Sonnen and Jones against one another as coaches on The Ultimate Fighter. But Covington doesn't have odd circumstances like a complication at the top of the division, lack of better options, late injuries, GOAT status, or global pandemics to back him up here. And unlike Dan Henderson's unmerited chance to dethrone Michael Bisping at UFC 204, Covington hasn't previously shared the cage with Leon Edwards, and aside from the cringe-worthy attempts at promoting the fight, there's no real history between them either. So why are we doing this? Probably the thing that motivates a business worth an estimated $12 billion. Money. We don't have access to confirmed numbers, but if the reports about the previous 3 pay-per-view events that Colby headlined are accurate, then the average 1.1 million buys he generates seems like something Dana and the gang would be hoping for. Even with Belal Muhammad's 10-fight unbeaten streak and actual history with Edwards, the champ fighting the most obvious and deserving contender would have a hard time reaching that level of financial success. But if that's the case, why not do what they did with Sonnen and Jones? Actually forcing us to care more about the matchup with extra content centered around the fight, such as a season of Tough, would give them a better chance at maximizing what's there. However undeserved this title shot is, if UFC 296 concludes with the belt being wrapped around Colby Covington's waist, this video would have aged worse than Mickey Rourke. Truth be told, That's a very real possibility. With his unrelenting style of high volume, high pace, chain wrestling, and weaponized cardio, it could be a rough night for Leon Edwards. Considering the times he has faded in the stretch, combined with Colby's tendency to turn it up in the later rounds, we could very well end up getting a new champ this Saturday. Is Colby Covington the most undeserving title challenger in UFC history? And can he get it done this Saturday against Leon Edwards? Subscribe to The Weigh-In for more fight content. Stay beautiful, stay positive, stay sexy. I'll see you when I see you.